Britain was not always called Britain, so what was the name before it was called Britain? Albion is the first recorded name. Where does Albion come from? Recorded in Greek. That's what this video is about, and I want to put forward an idea. If you speak Welsh and if you've got studies in Welsh under your belt as well, the answer is quite obvious that it doesn't come from this idea of Albion being connected to Latin white. It's probably just a misunderstanding, and I'm going to take you through and show you here why I think that's the case and put forward my argument of, in fact, Albion comes from Old Welsh, or British really, before that. Croeso. Welcome to the channel. This is Benjamin. But just because it's recorded in Greek does not mean it's Greek. Brilliant is not English, is it? And before I go further, I just want to note that when cultures meet other cultures, the cultures usually take just a random word because they can't speak the same language. So for example, I'm from Texas, right? In Texas, Texas, that's where the word Texas comes from. It's from like an Apache language. It means friend. I guess when they showed up, they're like, hey, you want to be friends? And the Spanish were like, nope. Anyway, but Quebec is the same thing. It means like narrow waterway. And I mean, look where Montreal is. It's on a narrow waterway. Chile, you have a people, Mapuche, and that's where the word Chile comes from. It means where the land ends. Well, guess where Chile is? It's where the land ends. So when you meet new people, you're like, hello, how are you? What is this land? And usually they just describe something that was around them. And what if that's what happened? Albion is recorded in Greek first, and the Greek civilization had been in communication with us, at least through trade, as far back as the Mycenaean civilization. This new Greek civilization was expansive in mercantile and commercial means, and it wanted metals cheaper than it could get, and from higher level mines easier to get at. And one of the best places for that was southwest Britain, Cornwall, Devon. We're talking 1650 BCE to about 1100 BCE. I mean, this is a long time ago. And what they did, they came here for tin. There's places in Cornwall where we have beautiful golden cups, daggers, double-bladed axes, in these metals of the Mycenaean make. So they were trading, at least by extension through other people, maybe, but maybe they came up directly, we don't know. But this continues for 1,000 years and more. Surely someone in all that time was like, I'll cut out the middleman in my business, sail up there with a boat myself, trade for their tin, the metal. And you have these two places in Cornwall, Plunennis, and the Cornish name Krugreslich. So early on, people were trading with us. Quite far after this, you had Herodotus writing in 430 BCE about a group of islands off the coast of Iberia to the north, Cassiterides, tin islands of the metal tin. And these Cassiterides were, he was saying, from which we are said to get our tin. They knew that there were islands up this way. There was no secure knowledge of where they lay. They didn't explicitly describe them in terms of two large islands or exactly where. They just knew that they were beyond Iberia to the north. So we can't say that they were saying this was Britain yet. However, other writers, Latin writers like Posidonius, Diodorus, and Strabo call them islands a ways off the northwest coast of Iberia. We're kind of getting the idea that they are calling them this, but there's nothing further concrete, so this is not an actual name for Britain or Ireland at all. This is still in the realm of myth, but we're getting 10 for sure. In the next century, in the 4th century, we get a philosopher named Aristotle. I know Aristotle, but I pronounce the restaurant in America Chipotle, so it's tempting. And we get the word Albion here. And for Ireland, Jern. He wrote in On the Universe, but we're not sure entirely if this is him. And in this On the Universe, it's written, of these two great islands, Britannia together, and then Albion and Jern separate. There's something to that. It may be that something's been lost or that we interpreted it wrong. We don't know. Around the time Aristotle passed, you have Patrias from Massilia, present-day Marseille, which was Greek at the time. He, we know, came to Britain on a great voyage, and he gives more concrete names. He gives Britannicae and Britanniae for Britain and the British Isles, but he may have used Albion for just Britain or British people. He's also the first to record the midnight sun. Oh, that's cool. I wish I could be the first guy to record the midnight sun. And he is coming here from the southwest, and he would have come to Cornwall or Devon first, surely. He uses Britannicae. He's obviously running into British speakers. And Pliny the Elder, who lived from 24 to 79, a Roman, said in his Natural History, it was itself named Albion, whilst all the islands about which we shall soon briefly speak are called the Britanniae. Obviously there was a Pliny the Younger, huh? So it seems they're making a differentiation between the groupings of the islands, the people on Britain and the Isle of Britain, and the Isle of Ireland. So that's certainly beyond the concept of myth into the physical reality of their world. And we also have Ptolemy, a Greek, Egyptian, Roman citizen, who's a fascinating character. It is noteworthy that he called it Albion, probably just an inflection from his specific kind of Greek in Egypt, but more than one writer would do so after him. Albion. Hallelujah. In the 4th century, Avennius, a Latin writer, does not use the name Britannia, which by then was quite official. Nessos Iernon kai Albionon, the Isles of the Iernians and Albiones. So they're viewing Albion as like peoples of Alba, in a way. So as the Roman Empire is clearly expanding, the official name clearly is Britannia, but the name Albion is not extinguished. So where did Greeks get this name from? Right. So one thing when looking at this becomes really clear is that no one's looking at this from a Welsh viewpoint. The consensus of where Albion comes from is Latin-centric, but this was a British and Greek interaction. As I've said, white in Latin was Alba or Albus, and this was pre-Latin expansion. At the time of Greek exploration to Britain, the Latins were an insignificant tribe, and if this means bright or white, well, the ancient Greek word for that would be leukos, and that's a bit like Welsh, lle, the old Welsh word for light. Today it's gola. You get words with this L or U sound after it across Indo-European languages to do with light, like in English, light. In Latin, lux. Golai in Welsh comes from this lle. Licht in German. And it goes on and on. So what does the name Albion mean? I mean, if it's not actually Greek or Latin, but it comes from something, what does it mean? Like a country or mountains or somewhere. Albania. Yes. Let's look at this country. So where does the name Albania come from? So I looked this up, and there's a guy named Polybus in the 2nd century BCE, a Greek, who writes about a people to the north, Arboi, basically present-day Albania. And he writes a bit about what this means. But this comes from an Albanian word, arpen or arber, meaning plains or field, and look at the geography of Albania today. I had no idea that Albania was such a bowl in terms of the fertile plains surrounded by such precipitous, sharp mountains. Of course a nation grew there. But that doesn't help us with Albion, does it? Can you think of anywhere that sounds like Alps? The Alps, yes! Yes. What about these? High mountains. So where does the name Alps come from? We have a man in the late 4th century who is a grammarian and his first language is Latin, and he says something quite peculiar for someone whose first language is Latin about the origin of the name Alps. And his name is Maurus Servius Honoratus, quite a learned fellow, and he comments on the Aeneid by the poet Virgil, and he says this: Sane omnes altitudines montium liceta Gallis Alpes vocentur, propria tamen iuga mentium sunt, which means, of course, all of the heights of the mountains are called Alps by the Gauls. They are properly the mountain ranges of Gaul. So we have a source saying that a language very much like Welsh had given the name to the Alps. Is there anything else we can attach to the Alps that's suggesting of this meaning? And yes, there's this place in France called Le Plateau d'Albion. The Plateau of Albion. Where is this? The Plateau of Albion. But where does that name come from, right? So I looked this up, and there's this confederation, or there was a confederation of Celtic tribes, 3 main tribes. This was called the Albici, les Albiques. And the main tribe of these people were the Albienses. And they lived in this area of the Pre-Alps, the before Alps, which are upland just before you get to the Central Alps, in this southeast bit of France. And they worshipped a god. Now this name is, Albiorix, World King. But that world bit, it's more likely to do with the earth itself rather than thinking of ruling over the world. The notion that they're talking of the substance of the earth here. Albiorix, World King. That's spooky. And this was kind of a Celtic god akin to Mars, but there was that reddish clay, earthy element to him wherever we find him. They're attaching this name Alb to high, exposed, rocky places. Well, a lot of the British landscape is like that. And the word for world in Gaulish was Albios. And now we get to what I was getting at. There's a Welsh dimension to this. Look at this word, Albios. This is a reconstruction of Indo-European, meaning both white and a bit of earth. And what happened, especially in early Indo-European linguistics, is words meant more than one thing. There weren't as many words, And as languages broke up into different branches, different families of our Indo-European family, different branches took single meanings of those different words. Latin took the white bit, and Celtic split, right? So the Irish branch of Celtic took this white bit, right? So look at Irish. Albu, Albu. This became Alban, which became Scots Gaelic for Scotland, white. But we in Welsh and through British and Gaulish didn't take this route. We took Albios, meaning earth, and so this changed over time. Albio, Alvith, Elvith, a clump of earth, an area, Elvith. And the word for Scotland in Welsh today is Ralban, and I don't think this comes through the Irish route. I think this means kind of upland bit. It's a remnant of an older Welsh for just remembering, like the Alps come from probably a Celtic root, that same word. And you have changes within Welsh from early Welsh, or British rather, into Welsh as it changed. So Avon was river, became Avon, and then Avon. That B softened. And that beta sound in Greek has changed as well. It used to be more of a B sound, but it changed to more of a V sound. So, and if it's written with this letter, beta, it makes sense that it was likely pronounced as it was changing a V sound, like you get a lot. So like apple in Welsh is afol. It didn't used to be. It was more of an abol sound. And then it changed slowly. But that doesn't explain the vowel shift between a and e. To imitate is efelychu in Welsh. Now, this comes all the way back from similaris, likeness. This changed in Welsh to hafol. The M softened to an F. And the S and H shifted, as happened in many words like in summer became have. So this likeness word like similar became hafol in Welsh, and then added a verb ending, efelychu. And when the accent shifted on such a long word, it changed the vowels. And this, I think, is happening with Albion, this vowel shift to Elvith. Because if it was an S ending, as it would have been in terms of an early Indo-European ending, Lithuanian keeps a lot of this S ending, by the way, and so does Cornish. But the vowel would have changed, and that S at the end would have naturally become a D. And in Greek, it would have naturally become an N at the end. All of these shifts fit exactly into how Indo-European languages changed. If we take an assumption that Albion comes from a British root, a British word, rather than a Greek one, and Elvi. Now, this is related to elementa, but I think this is a cognate rather than comes from it, as people have said. I think these two developed independently from the same Indo-European root. So in Latin, that VB sound became an M sound. But in Welsh, that B sound went down more toward V sound. We do get M's in instances, but it's a different instance. More of a nasal sound that produced it. For instance, our word for element is elven. And people have said that this comes from Latin, but if we take that Elvith does come from an albia type root, then this really just comes from that same root rather than from Latin, because the en ending insinuates that it's a bit of a thing from earth, And if the earth substance bit is what we're talking about, it didn't come from Latin. It didn't come from Elementa. It come from British. It comes from British rather than Latin. And that's going back to what I said about the Latin-centric view of the world. I think, yes, we need to be proud of our Romano-Greek greatness and glory, absolutely. But we don't look at things from a Welsh perspective enough. So here's what I think happened. Some Greek guy came here, wanting to cut out the middleman, like, hey, I'll make some money quick, right? He came up here and he landed in like Devon, Cornwall area, and so when they came on shore, obviously they couldn't speak each other's languages. And the Greeks were like, hey, what's the name of this place? Where am I? And they're like, this is earth, you idiot. Like, this is land, right? Like, you came from the sea, this is land. They grabbed up a piece of the earth and like, Elviv. And then in their tongue, it would have been more like, Albion. And the Greeks heard Albion for this place. That's what I think happened. What do you think happened? Let me know down in the comments. I hope you enjoyed that video, and if you did, please consider subscribing, hitting a like, leaving a super like, or join me on Patreon, like these kind, donating people here. And we will see you in the next episode. Diolch yn fawr iawn, thank you very much.